Hey everybody, welcome back. You can see me waving. I'm in my RV, Wayne Hoffman, president of Idaho Freedom Action, and we're here with Jacyn Gallagher, a state representative, a freshman from the Weiser area, District 9, doing a really heck of a bang-up job already there in her first term. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How are things going for you?
Busy. Good, good,
Busy?
busy.
You're supposed to be resting and not having to do anything.
Ha, that's hilarious.
How was your first legislative session?
How was it?
Yeah,
Um, well, interesting, educational,
in- interesting and educational. Okay.
and overwhelming.
Did, really? How so?
Uh, it's just a lot, and it all goes really fast. Um, I mean, it's you kind of get a slow start in the beginning. We don't meet long during our floor sessions. Um, but I'm on three committees, so I have three committees also.
You're on the Ag Committee, the Health and Welfare Committee, and Judiciary and Rules Committee.
Yes.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, which one of those is the most entertaining? If I'm going to go and I'm looking for a little bit of entertainment in my life, and I want to attend a committee meeting. Which one of those you think I should go to? Which one was the most interesting for you, I guess?
Um, well, they're also different and different, just different things in each one. I would say ag committee is probably the most light as far as content and things that we hear and discuss. Um, it's fun. It's fun because I learned a lot, and learning to me is fun at this point in my life. I wish I would have felt that way in my 20s, but anyway, subject. Um, yeah, ag is fun, and also ag swag is the best swag. Uh, yeah, got some awesome grilling cheese, and but aside from that, just learning more about Idaho. Um,
The the
is all.
policies there are not as intense. If I recall correctly, I worked for the State Department of Agriculture for a year and a half and had to attend a number of ag committee meetings. And even as part of our work with the Freedom Foundation, we don't find ourselves in the ag committee very often. It happens, but it's pretty rare. But judiciary and rules and health and welfare, there's a lot going on there. I mean, you're dealing with. I know you guys talked about Medicaid expansion and health and welfare. I know you talked about fentanyl in Jude and rules. So maybe talk about those things a little bit. Start with Medicaid expansion. I mean, there are some folks in there who are big proponents of keeping Medicaid expansion going. Where are you on that?
Well, our chairman, John Vanderwater, actually brought a bill forth to eliminate Medicaid or
Medicaid expansion.
Medicaid
Yeah.
expansion. And I mean, it was kind of done in, I don't even know what the word is, not jest, because that's not right. Um, but just kind of as a, well, look, if we can't cut the budgets somehow, somewhere, there is always the possibility that we could just cut it completely. So I think it was just kind of thrown out there as we need to do some work to reduce the spending.
It was food for thought. It was sort of here's a possible way to reduce the Medicaid expenditures.
Yeah, right. And each of us were assigned a small portion of Medicaid area to look at for any reductions. And I found a couple in just the small section that I was looking at. It was like, I don't know, silly stuff like buying a lawnmower, and the budget for the lawnmower was like, I mean, I went online and looked at professional lawnmowers, industrial lawnmowers, and the expense of that was way less than what they were budgeting for and what they were asking for.
What does Medicaid need a lawnmower for?
I believe it was part of the it was for a like a mental health facility, and they needed it for the grounds, keeping the grounds.
Okay,
Uh,
interesting.
or it was part of the health and welfare budget. So, um, but there were a couple little things like that. But if you add up all of those little things, it becomes a big thing. It
Uh,
becomes a big expense. If you add up each one of those thousands of dollars in unnecessary spending, um, it would cut money. It would cut a lot of money.
but aren't we being silly about this in the first place? Should Idaho or any state for that matter even be in the Medicaid business?
No.
What makes you say that so succinctly and assuredly?
Um, well, I believe that people need to take personal responsibility for themselves. There are so many times that we find, I just went to a health and welfare meeting on Monday, and they were talking about fraud, and fraud not only from the customer, but also from the providers. There's just so, I mean, it really, it almost feels like government just needs to be gutted and re-begun. And I say that carefully. I don't, there's things I'm not going to support that might do that in kind of a roundabout way that I don't think is good. However, there's just been so much growth and so much growth. And we look at the budget bills that we vote on, and I mean, everything grows. Nothing ever goes away. Once these programs get started, there's just no pulling them back.
That's very weird for a state that's controlled 86% or thereabouts by Republicans, isn't it?
You are making me laugh. Well, let me just say that I moved here to get away from a very blue state. And I thought, oh, going to Idaho, it's going to be this bright, deep red state, not going to have to worry about this stuff. I'm going to be retired. We can travel and do things. And I got here and got involved with the Republican Party and started to learn about how the Republican Party here in Idaho is working and going. And decided I needed to get in the fight. And if I want to keep the red state, that I feel the people are conservative. But we have leadership that is not so conservative. And, you know, you can go down many roads of why you think that they're not conservative. I think there's been a lot of globalism, big pharma, big hospitals, big ag, and I am just one of the people, and I feel like I represent just the people, and not big corporations, big farmers, big hospitals. And we've got to care for those people. We've got to care for our neighbors, and I think sometimes people lose sight of that we are a state made up of the people. We're not a state that should be controlled by the big hospitals and by corporate farms. And you have, I mean, we had a good bill that China can't come in and buy certain land. That's good. But you have big farms that are also wanting driver's licenses for illegals. I will never ever vote for that. I won't vote for any sort of amnesty. And I think it's just all this big, huge, these big entities have taken over. And we, the people, are losing our voice. And that's, that's my thing. I am just, when I campaigned that I am just one of you. I am just one of the people. I'm concerned for our state. We have nowhere else to go. We have nowhere else to go. I know that so I heard a couple people mention Tennessee. Well, I'm just going to leave Idaho and I'm going to go to Tennessee. Well, you know what? Tennessee, they don't even have enough conservative legislators to have a Freedom Caucus. So I'm part of the Freedom Caucus here in Idaho, and we're going strong, and we are fighting for every person, the people, we the people. Our government is supposed to be for we the people. And I'm principled and have values for the people and not big business, big ag.
Why is it that that these entities and it's interesting, by the way, just as a side note. So the Ag Committee did not take up the measure which passed the Senate, which called for amnesty for illegals in Idaho, which is interesting. But I mean, you have a lot of bills that were ultimately considered in some fashion on the floor that are arguably socialist. The Idaho Launch Program being one of those. I think I'm pretty sure you voted against that. The loan forgiveness for certain kinds of workers that passed and was signed into law by the governor. There's just a lot of things like that, and of course, you mentioned the Medicaid Expansion repeal bill, which couldn't even get a hearing, and it was the committee chairman's bill, essentially. So what's really going on? Why are all these leftist proposals passing? And were you surprised by that when you got to the Capitol this year for your first session?
Yes and no, because being involved, the year before I ran, year before that, I would go down to the Capitol once a week, at least, and sit in on some committees. And so I was learning who was who. But I really think it's dollars. It's dollars. Dollars are running this state, and we need to get back to what the people want. Um, and I have a prediction. So we talked a little bit about the Ag Committee, and we get presentations. People come in and do presentations. So you brought up the nursing loan repayment. Well, in the Ag Committee, we had I can't remember who it was, but we had a presentation on the lack of large animal veterinarians in rural Idaho. The lack of large animal veterinarians in rural Idaho. So the nursing bill was the lack of nurses in rural Idaho. I have a prediction. There may potentially be a bill that shows up to ask for loan forgiveness for large animal vets in rural Idaho.
I have no doubt about that. I have no doubt about
that. That was a presentation that was brought before us, and I thought, so similar to the rural nurses. And is this going to be a bill that comes up? So that's just a little prediction that I have.
Don't those presentations just sort of invite the narrative that you're from the government and you're there to help? So people show up, they give their presentation. Here's this problem that we're having. And then you're supposed to divine some kind of solution to whatever it is that ails them. We lack people in a certain profession, or we have, some issue that we think that, we don't have enough dairies, or we don't have enough
we don't have enough employees at the dairies.
Right. All those things. And so you're supposed to you're supposed to put your thinking cap and solve that problem. And if they bring enough money to the table and say, oh, by the way, and they can't connect the bill to the donation, but if you can kind of wink and nod and smile and say, hey, by the way, Senator, you're doing a really great job. Thanks for considering our issues. We'll be sure to support you in the next campaign, or representative, sorry. Then you're going to get campaign donations and you get to be reelected indefinitely. Is that the what's happening here?
I would believe that, yes, that is what is happening. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can go and look at where where candidates' donations come from. Most of mine were grassroots, from the people, just small donations here and there. Yeah, and people ask me about the lobbyists and what I didn't have very many lobbyists come to talk to me, and I don't know. I mean, this session, at the beginning of session, I didn't really have a voting record, but now I do. So I would guess that due to my voting record, I won't get many visits from lobbyists, because I will always vote my principles and values, because that's how I ran. That's how I got elected. The people that voted for me and my principles and values. And I'm not going to compromise those for money to get reelected. I'm not here to get reelected. That's not my job. My job is not to go out and get reelected. If the people like what I have done, and I did what I said I was going to do, I did that. I voted as a true conservative.
How does all that play into, say, for example, the fentanyl debate? I mean, that was heavily lobbied too. So, I mean, how did that come into play as you discussed that issue? By way of background, there was a bill, mandatory minimum sentences for people trafficking fentanyl. By way of reminder, trafficking isn't selling necessarily; it's mere possession over a certain amount. And we were opposed to the legislation. The Conservative Political Action Committee was opposed. I don't recall what your action was in that committee, but you were lobbied on that pretty heavily too.
Yes, that was one. Yeah. And that is, so as I go out and speak to people, I try to talk to them about the statement of purpose on a bill, and how a bill, it sounds really good. The headline sounds really good. The statement of purpose sounds like, yes, that's what we need. But then as you read the bills and you get further into them, sometimes it's not as good as it sounds on the front page. And the fentanyl bill, that's it was a really, really hard one. I mean, I had some constituents that were very upset that I was, and it's not that I was against it, it's just that I had what I felt was good reasons to not vote for it. I think it needs some work. And my reasoning on that was, what if, and they'll tell you that this doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen very often, but one time is enough. If for example, say I had a niece in a car on a date with a guy, and she's just in the car, and they get pulled over for whatever reason, and the guy happens to have a little tiny bit of fentanyl in his glove box or whatever, then my innocent niece is now going to possibly go to jail for being in possession of that when she had no clue that that was even there. And they don't use a way to separate. It explained to us different ways, but if there's, one grain of fentanyl in a 1 pound bag of flour, that fentanyl is considered a bag, that 1 pound of fentanyl. It's not It's not divided out. It's not measured in any way. So yes, it's wrong
Right.
for people to have it. Yes, it's wrong for people to sell it. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's killing people. But we have to go about this the right way. And we have to protect the innocent from, we don't want our jails full of people that didn't do anything wrong, or were a part of something that they didn't even know they were a part of. Jails need to be full of criminals that actually had criminal intent. And that's the thing. I think judges need to be able to, and regardless of whether we have good judges, there's probably good judges and there's not so good judges. There's conservative judges and liberal judges. But those judges need to be, they're put in a position to use discretion and discernment in intent. And we have to be able to allow them to do their job. And
Yeah, and for those who don't understand it, you gave a very good description of that. It's not the grain of fentanyl that matters, it's the package in which it's contained. And I did some calculations too, and I know that some fentanyl comes in the form of suckers or lollipops. And so if you have 3 of those, you just have lollipops, and you can't tell that they contain fentanyl. That's a 15-year prison sentence for trafficking, whether you give that to somebody or not, under the bill that was proposed. Unlike, cocaine or heroin, you can see that, that you got, more than likely you have a pretty good idea that you've got some kind of illegal drug. You may not know that with fentanyl. And so that was a problem. But the law enforcement community, meaning existing law enforcement, prosecutors, and retired law enforcement, lobbied heavily for that bill, and they pushed really, really hard to get that passed. And I think, fortunately, you recognized some of the issues that were going to come of that somebody could very easily go to prison and not even know why they're going to prison, just by mere possession and being defined as a trafficker. But those are hard bills to talk about.
that was a tough one. That was a really, really tough one. Yeah. It was hard, and people were angry that it didn't get through. And I've also spoken with at length, and it's hard for me to remember every detail about everything, but talking with people in the legal system and prosecutors and public defenders, how there is question on how effective mandatory minimums are. And I believe there's reports on the effectiveness of mandatory minimums. And it's just a big subject. And like I said, the statement purpose always sounds good. Yeah, we want to go hard on mandatory minimums. We want to go hard on fentanyl. But there just has to be a way to protect the innocent, and there has to be a way to go after those that have bad intentions.
Nice.
And also, if we would just close up the border, that might help. Might
You
help.
think? You think just a little bit? Yeah, I know. It's crazy. You're dealing with a symptom of a bigger problem. So what do you have cooking for next legislative session?
Lots of support for good legislation. I ran a bill last session, debating whether I'm going to run it again. It's a vitamin protection bill, basically. So I'm kind of just thinking about how I can reword it and make it more. I mean, it lost by 1 vote in the Senate. It made it all the way through pretty easily and lost by 1 vote in the Senate. And sometimes I think there are legislators that vote on whether they like someone or not. And I mean, I didn't present in the Senate. I presented it in health and welfare in the Senate, and that was fine. It got through. But sometimes I have a feeling people vote because of who the person is that's bringing the bill forward, which
That
is
was the bill.
absolutely wrong.
Yeah, I don't recall that one. Was that something to do with preventing the government from somehow stopping the sale of supplements or something, or regulating it via the FDA?
Yes, exactly. That's what it
Yeah,
is. It's stopping if the federal government decides, which they're trying to do. Um, Dick Durbin, it has been trying to pass this for years, that basically the ultimate goal is to have vitamins and supplements regulated the same way that drugs are. Well, vitamins and supplements are not drugs, they're natural products.
right.
And those of us who tried to take care of our health on our own and have personal responsibility for our bodies, uh, we should have access to those no matter what the federal government decides to do, because vitamin C's been around forever. Vitamin D's been around forever. And there are small manufacturers that would be affected by this, that it would not be able, it just wouldn't be, if they have fees and they have to go through all this regulation. Um, anyway, it's a state sovereignty bill, which I am a firm believer that we in our state, we were given the right to make our own rules and laws for our state, for our people, um, for what is important to Idahoans. So this bill, and one of the arguments was, well, there were different things, but my rebuttal was, okay, one of the arguments was that we don't want to go against the federal government. Whatever the federal government does, we don't want to have litigation and different things. And my response to that was, well, what about marijuana? It's not legal federally, but there's all these states that have made it legal. And I'm not going there one way or the other on that subject. However, I'm talking about vitamins and supplements here, natural products. Uh, it should be a no-brainer, and for the most part, it was. But
Yeah.
again, I think there might have been some personality things that prevented it from getting all the way through.
Well, that's a very strange thing that you don't want to go against the federal government, but the federal government has no jurisdiction there anyway. I mean, I don't read anything in the Constitution that says the federal government's to have any kind of role in healthcare issues, drugs, vitamins, nutrients, anything like that. And of course, the federal government doesn't have any role in education either. And here we are.
Right.
So, I
Yeah, I
mean, yeah, but perfectly responsible for the state to take a position on that. Interesting.
think so. And it's vitamins and supplements. I mean, come on.
I'd also tell you that there are a lot of people who I know personally who have had healthcare problems, and they go to their doctors, and their doctors prescribe them some prescription. But really, what's happening is they're vitamin or mineral deficient. So I have some recurring, pain or vision problems or whatever it may be, and here's your drug that we think will handle that. When it might be a vitamin D deficiency, or it might be something, vitamin C, or iron, whatever. It's fascinating how the government wants to prevent people, which is really what they're talking about. So they do it in the guise of protection. We want to protect the public, but really it's about protecting big pharma from competition.
Exactly. Ding, ding, ding. You hit the
There
nail
you
on
go.
the head.
Yeah,
Nail on the head.
people need to wake up. The government's not your friend.
They're not your daddy or your mommy. And
Yep.
uh, um, big pharma, vitamins and supplements are a huge industry, growing, especially after the last 3 years and what happened. Vitamins and supplements have become this explosive industry, and maybe big pharma wants in on that.
Well, yeah, or maybe they want to prevent it from being a thing. You also see people who are turning to various other alternatives to pharmaceutical psychotropics, antidepressant, anti-anxiety. And what they're doing is trying to turn those products, mushrooms, cannabis, or whatever, into pharmaceuticals. So anyway, fascinating development with regard to that. Is like, okay, we don't want our market share taken away, so we've got to figure out a way to get in on it.
Exactly.
Well,
Yeah.
Jacyn, you're doing a wonderful job, and we really appreciate you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be on the program. You're welcome back anytime. I look forward to continuing our conversations with you.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate all the work that the Freedom Foundation does. Just reading the bills, and I think some of us that have higher scores get thrown this, well, why do you just, you're just doing whatever the Freedom Foundation tells you to do. Well, you know what? No. And I am really, really tired of hearing that. Just because, as I said, I ran on my principles and values. And just because my principles and values, my conservative principles and values, happen to align with the same metrics that the Freedom Foundation uses to score, that does not mean that the Freedom Foundation is telling me what to do. I
don't recall ever having a single conversation with you where I said, okay, here's how you need to vote today. And where you said, oh yeah, okay, yes, sir, yes, sir. No. And I don't know why people don't ask that question of the IACI people, the folks that score 100% of IACI. No one ever goes and says, well, you're just a stooge for IACI.
Exactly.
But for some reason, you're a stooge for us. It's a kind of a weird thing.
Well, I'm tired of hearing it, and I appreciate all the work that you guys do. And, Conservatives has been really supportive, and my friends at the Freedom Caucus. I mean, it's just, I'm thankful to have good conservative people around me. So thank you.
We're glad to do it. And thank you for watching today. If you like the content, be sure to hit the like, subscribe button, and share the content. And we'll be talking to you all again in the next one. Bye-bye.